Or to the cloud. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to today's governance and risk call number 176. PSA, Long for Wisdom, is not going to be hosting today. He is feeling a bit under the weather, so I am stepping in to carry. And likewise, Pros is actually on vacation this week. So yeah, it's going to be all GovComps today, basically. So yeah, Long for Wisdom is still here. So he's going to be kind of hanging out in chat. But yeah. So yeah, welcome to the Governance and Risk Call. This is a public call at MakerDAO where we bring together internal and external stakeholders and kind of go through a handful of different things. The contents of the call involve four main components: a governance roundup where we go through the votes, MIPs, and the forum update for the week. And now we actually have a new segment called the Initiative Updates. And I'm going to be covering that shortly. We're going to do a brief overview of what it is, and we're going to cover three initiatives that we have been tracking and doing stakeholder alignment coordination around, including Layer 2, and then on and off-chain collateral management. We're also going to have not presentations that should actually read discussions because there's no real presentation, but we're going to be talking about the kind of the most pertinent topic of the week, which is upgrading the surplus auctions. We're going to talk a little bit about like the options in order of resource investment, other considerations, timelines, all that good stuff. And then lastly, if there's time at the end of the call, it's just open discussion. If anybody would like to bring things up, they can. We have an anonymous question box. If Artem, if you want to share that in the chat, be my guest. I'm pretty sure we check it every call. But yeah, so feel free to use it. And yeah, let's get rolling with the first update, which actually is going to be delivered by me. So today I'm going to cover the votes. So we have a few polls ongoing, two ongoing green light polls. One for the stable T-bill and the other for stable note. We also have 11 ratification polls, which just concluded on Monday, and they're going to be detailed in our MIP segment, so stay tuned for that. As for executive proposals, last week's executive passed and executed. The Maker Open Market Committee proposal parameter changes went through without a hitch. We also had Monday's out of schedule executive, which passed and executed. Essentially, it just raised the system surplus buffer to a temporary 250 million with the goal of basically discontinuing the surplus auctions and maker burn temporarily while the DAO figures out its next priorities and kind of what steps we want to take, which is alluding to the discussion we're going to have in a little bit. And then we also have a planned executive for tomorrow. And it's going to include some new core unit budgets, including the Oracle gas budget. So look out for that. And also it's going to effectively revoke content production's budget as a result of Monday's completed ratification poll to offboard their budget and their facilitator. So yeah, that's about it for the votes. I'm going to pass it off to Pablo, aka Blimpa, for the MIPS general update.
Thank you, David. Hello, everyone. Pablo here. First, I want to thank Gala and Civics for taking care of things while I was out on vacation. They did a great job. So yeah, ratification polls closed on Monday, the 24th, and we are going to take a quick look at the results. Spoiler, all proposals have been approved. So three new MIPs have been accepted. MIP 62, which defines a process for notifying poll users that their collateral is being afforded. MIP 63, the Maker Keeper Network, a unified repository to coordinate between the third-party keeper networks. And we have three sub-proposals derived from this MIP in RFC on the forum already, as we'll see in a bit. And MIP 64, the bug bounty program run by Unified Security. Also, we have four coordinated budgets that have been approved: the Oracle gas cost, budget adjustments for DAX and SES, and the budget for the second phase of SNE as defined in their mandate. Also, we are welcoming two new coordinates: Strategic Finance, whose mission is to provide financial reporting and analysis for the DAO, and TechOps, whose mission is to provide technical support services, obviously. As for other stuff, we have a core unit offboarding, that of MKT001, also known as content production, which has been offboarded and is no longer a core unit. Also, Will Remor is now the new and sole facilitator for real-world finance. As usual, we also have a number of proposals in RFC that need your feedback on the forum. Some have been there for a while now, so I'm not going to be exhaustive here. So this one has been on the forum posted for a while now, but pay attention to it because the onboarding proposal set for the prospective Maker Talent Core units is going to be seeing some modifications and revisions very soon and is eligible to enter February's governance cycle. We also have a number of budget adjustments for risk, collateral engineering services, and unified security. We have the facilitator on and offboarding for docs. We have a torch passing between Philip and Dennis in this case. And finally, we have an amendment for MIP 55 that improves clarity. That is the special purpose fund MIP, by the way. We also have an amendment for the freshly accepted MIP 64 to expedite small bug bounty payouts, and this entails an adjustment to their budget too. So please take a look. And we have 3 MIP 63 C4 sub-proposals to onboard Maker Keeper networks. And yes, I think I didn't miss anything. That's pretty much it at the moment. So thank you, guys.
All right, the next update, thank you, Blippa, I appreciate you. Next update is going to be the forum update. Artem puts together a forum at a glance thread that we publish right before this call every week. And so, yeah, Artem, take it away.
Awesome, thanks, David. Quick note, kind of scaled up the forum at a glance to be a little bit more comprehensive. So leave any feedback for improvements so I could, make a better forum at a glance for you guys. And we'll get started. So we're reviewing the week of January 20th up to today, January 27th of 2022. And we're beginning with the week's top announcements. Now, last Friday was a stress test of our liquidation system, which went overall quite well. And in response to the event, the Risk Core Unit released an analysis and data report for the collateral auctions and surplus auctions that occurred during that Friday. The report covers many specific details of these auctions, including coverage of the largest concern being the 7-sibling vault owner having over 632 million debt at risk. In conclusion, though, the effective slippage of these auctions showed that the protocol overspent about 2.5 million DAI for MKR collected. However, this number should be taken with a grain of salt. And for more information and details on the whole analysis, please check out the original post. You could check it at the forum at a glance as well. And moving on. Next up, please welcome, with the help of SES, the new incubating core unit known as Maker Academy. They released an introductory post about their core unit. The post includes a description of the core unit itself, a facilitator introduction, also what's coming up next in their cookbook, and a call to action for more employees and any ideas or suggestions by the community. So check out that post. And next up, there are currently 3 auction UIs in the Maker ecosystem, which could be confusing to users, especially with the lack of documentation or clarity on how to use or when to use some of them. Meanwhile, as the SideStream core unit is building out their unified auctions UI during this transition period, the Dux core unit identified this period as an opportunity to target some low-hanging fruit to improve the discoverability of UIs. And in collaboration with Lucas from SideStream core unit, the Dux core unit have defined a couple of short-term measures that could help increase the discoverability of the UIs for front-end users and end users. Right now they continue to work through the collateral management for on-chain initiative called Come On, until the SideStream core unit is ready to fully own the domain of auction UIs, and then there will be some follow-up posts from there. And moving on to our top discussions. As the community seeks to scale real-world finance program, the real-world finance core unit and the community must support external counsel, which is a commercially standard practice. In response, Christian Peterson submits an informal poll seeking the support from the community towards the approach that borrowers will be required to pay for makers' external legal support. Check out the forum at a glance for the original post for more information, and please make a vote. Next up, as we saw, gaining 40,000 MKR is possible in the open market. And that means that an actor alone with the support or from the support of a few actors inside the protocol could sway the vote in whatever direction desired. In response to this event, Just In Case addresses the root causes that had led to this event and presents potential solutions and configurations to help improve the future of governance and delegation. Next up, Chris wants to personally convince maker holders why increasing the surplus buffer is the right strategy to ensure long-term growth of the protocol. He explains how a bigger surplus buffer can be used as fuel for growth and that we shouldn't be short-sighted by burning MKR. Instead, we should focus on reinvesting into growth for the protocol. In the long term, this could even improve the value of MKR. He adds some more details on his thoughts, and there's also some discussion in the post, so check it out. And we're moving on to our active signal requests. There are 3 signal requests which are currently active. First up, bringing back the MKR burn with the executive vote that was recently scheduled. We're going to have a surplus buffer set to 250 million. With no further burning that will be happening anytime soon. This has been done as a counteraction of the events of last Friday as a short-term fix, and a Hexanaut from PE team already began drafting a more sustainable solution that has potential to be activated on the mainnet soon, which will introduce the rate limiting and to the flapper, limiting the number of parallel auctions. Multiple ideas of replacing the current flapper have been floating around in the past. So in response, Shupi submits a signal request to find out whether the community would like to either do nothing and not burn any more MKR until we have a long-term solution in place, or introduce the rate limiting into the flapper and bring back MKR burning as soon as possible. Next up, we have a signal request to offloading the TUSDA. A discussion and signal request submitted over a year ago has passed and set the debt ceiling of TUSDA to 0 DAI. Today, there's still about 26 million DAI of outstanding debt. And the increase of the stability fee to 1% hasn't changed anything. In response to this, Shupi offers 3 options as potential changes to the TUSD and asks the community whether they want to offload to a new TUSD PSM with a debt ceiling of 0, or activate liquidations on TUSDA keepers, or keep it as is and do nothing. And our final signal request is to extend the delegation compensation trial. The initial signal request that approved the delegation compensation trial implemented a 3-month trial period. We recognized that initial parameter requirements were too harsh and introduced the performance modifier through a signal request, which has been added to MIP 61. As things currently stand, MIP 61 hasn't been formally completely submitted, and there's still a few changes being discussed. January is the final month currently covered by the trial, and compensation for recognized delegates would cease after this month. In response to this, Patrick asks the community whether we should extend the delegate compensation trial by a maximum of 6 months and end it if the MIP 61 were to be ratified. And that's it for a forum at a glance. It was kind of plump today, actually, pretty hefty, so definitely check it out. It also contains a 3-point summary, evaluations and reports, ongoing initiatives, help wanted, and a lot more announcements and discussions than were mentioned in this call. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Artem, for the excellent overview. For this next segment, we're going to be talking about the initiative updates. And they will be presented by stakeholder alignment call leads, which 2 of those happen to be me. So, all right. Just a quick note of context. This is not a one-time update. It's a recurring segment. How often we're going to be updating weekly on the various initiatives, we're figuring it out. So, there's a balance that we need to strike between giving too much information and updating you guys too much versus updating kind of, yeah, there's balance. There's a lot of information and there's a lot of initiatives, as you'll see in one of my coming slides. And in general, we're iterating and improving the reporting format. So this is kind of a first pilot run of the format, and we are very open to suggestions. So please, reach out to us if you'd like to see something different or have a great suggestion. Slides. Okay, so this initiative update section is powered by the initiative tracking and reporting project. So many initiative words, and also the cross-core unit collaboration that's involved in it. So our team, GovComms, has been taking on a brand new project to track all of the various initiatives at Maker, to coordinate, the different stakeholders involved in each of these initiatives with kind of like this modular framework that we're developing in partnership with Wouter from SES. So why is this stakeholder alignment and initiatives tracking thing necessary? Well, we are in a DAO. It's a headless organization, and there's a lot of reasons to be doing this kind of practice. So I listed a bunch of them, but the main ones are really, it prevents stagnating initiatives, it produces natural accountability, produces feedback loops, it improves accuracy of projected timelines, it identifies existing resources and potential needs, creates efficiency and execution, it reduces responsibility gaps where people don't know who's responsible for what. It syncs, the globally diverse cross-team planning that's involved in many of these initiatives. And also it improves clarity by focusing on initiative output rather than team output, because we recognize that initiatives actually have a huge ecosystem of overlapping core units. So it doesn't make sense to really follow core unit updates individually unless you're trying to keep them accountable. For purposes of stakeholders and thinking about MakerDAO from a more holistic roadmap perspective, we believe that this is really important for focusing on initiative output. And also it creates confidence for external stakeholders, it produces a lot of clarity around the work that we're doing, not just who's doing it. In general, decentralized organizations need a modular shared framework for work planning, execution, and reporting. Individual core units need to collaborate to deliver results in a DAO. This is a natural part of that process. Or not really a natural part, but it should be a natural part. It also reduces bus factor. When you bring all of these different cross-functional teams, there's a lot of cross-functional knowledge sharing and also cross-team training that happens. And it also produces shared roadmaps, which I already mentioned are important for clarity. So to give some greater context around I'm sorry, just got to mute somebody. So to give a little bit of a greater context on the different initiatives that are actually happening at MakerDAO, there's 11 buckets that we've identified, like layer 2, collateral management for on and off chain, oracles, technical upgrades, organizational improvements, growth, stakeholder content, special purpose funds, risk, security, and all of these have sub-projects underneath them. Obviously not going to go through all of them, but we are working on tracking exactly what these trees are, and all of the different work that's happening at the DAO, and kind of taking the most pertinent and important ones and really starting there for doing this stakeholder alignment. So there's some process requirements for all this. Core units should be able to self-organize. They should be able to identify stakeholders. They should be able to identify common goals. They should be able to identify the solutions that need to be implemented, agree on the work breakdown of tasks that are associated with those milestones. Dependencies have to be mapped and understood, and at the same time, timelines have to be estimated correctly and orchestrated between all of these different teams that do all this different work. Autonomous execution is what we're going for, and it requires well understood best practices to avoid amateurism and really to avoid stagnation of initiatives due to responsibility gaps. And ultimately, this whole process, it can be leveraged to create a lot more transparency through exactly this process, the reporting. And so this is how the framework is basically structured, but every initiative kind of has 4 stages it could be in. There's an ideation workshop stage where there's an idea for an initiative, but there's a lot of thought that has to go into producing like the right game plan for it. Eventually that results in a solution design. And so there's a couple rounds of feedback that happened there. Solution design is actually very relevant to like technical projects where there's multiple dependencies and multiple considerations. But ultimately, every initiative goes through a work breakdown format. And this is where an initiative decides, all the stakeholders come together and they decide on the main milestones that have to happen over the next quarter, 2 quarters, year. And basically, they take the initiative and they map out all of the individual work that has to be done. After that, statuses are placed, owners are placed, and the stakeholder alignment call moves into this production coordination phase. And this is where all the deliverables are, kind of flattened out, and it really becomes formulaic of people before the call, they update all the stuff that happened, and the call is just used to kind of surface blockers, to discuss like key points to move forward on various milestones. And ultimately, all of this stuff, all of this coordination activity there's a lot of information that is shared there. And that's extracted and shared here on the governance and risk status updates. So that's just a little bit of context for this major program that we're running here at Maker. So some of the existing initiatives we are already doing stakeholder alignment calls and project tracking on are the collateral management on-chain initiative, the off-chain version of that same initiative, which is separate, but there's a lot of nuance between the two. Let me breathe. There's a lot of words. And then the third one is layer 2, which actually was the very first one that we piloted the stakeholder alignment calls on. And so, so that's the 3 that we're going to be bringing to you today. And some next ones that are planned are the security/emergency response planning initiative, as well as the new education and onboarding initiative. So I'm going to hand it off to Derek, and Derek, being the coordination lead of the layer 2 stakeholder coordination calls, he's put together this update for us, and he can bring us through it.
Do you mind if I let you drive, David, just for continuity?
Yeah, I got you on the slides. Just say next slide if I'm slow or something.
Cool. All right, next slide, please. So cool. I think David did a really good intro of what the stakeholder coordination meetings are, the fact that they're cross-functional in nature, and all talking about aligning on common milestones and the work that is broken down in those. So I'll breeze over that section, and then we can dive into the L2 specifics. So next slide, please. So yeah, much like David said, this is all about bringing together cross-functional stakeholders, defining milestones, making sure that we have a work breakdown that helps us to align tasks, understand the next steps. So all about understanding dependencies, blockers, and as we walk through these, for us on the L2 side, it's a weekly process. So understanding what those blockers are, talking about the accomplishments, and then providing GovComs and others with a weekly progress status update. And that really helps to keep aligned the expectations, understand what the tasks are, their relative priority, and quite importantly, the relationships between those various types of work, because as you'll see on the next slide, there are a lot of different stakeholders involved, and no, I have not captured all of them because they change quite regularly. Well, they updated quite regularly, as people were saying in the sidebar. So as the next slide shows, making sure that we have engagement from these different core units is critical. And like David mentioned, L2 that I'll be talking about in a moment, collateral onboarding, offboarding, and then the 2 that are coming shortly for security stakeholder and Maker Academy. I've already been talking to the Maker Academy guys and understanding how we in protocol engineering can contribute to that and work with other core units. So we have a coordinated response to these dedicated topic meetings. We still maintain the mandated actor meeting as that's an important sort of roll up for coordination across facilitators in the different groups. So I won't spend more time on that. I'll move to the next one, as I think David's covered everything here. So L2 progress specifically, let's first of all talk about the scope. So here we're talking about all efforts related to scaling DAI adoption across L2 rollups and sidechains. And you notice I'm not discriminating between rollups or sidechains. It's really about the fact of scaling DAI adoption, and anything that contributes to that is really fair game for this focus, this meeting of stakeholders. So you'll see the snapshot here that I have on the right side of the page. So it's really bringing out the full product lifecycle from inception, architecture, development, testing, auditing, working with third parties. And third parties can be external to Maker, internal core units, and then eventually deployment and maintenance once live. So pulling out a couple of the key points from this the snapshot that I have here is working on technical specification documentation so that what we're working on can be scaled towards other domains. Also working with growth on understanding domain liquidity so that we can work with third parties and get them more involved in building the ecosystem in these different domains. Also Oracle support. So they've been working on a proof of concept, which is functional. So making sure that that integrates with the work we're doing on the protocol engineering side. We've got upcoming discussions with risk parameter, with the risk team, and also integrating with growth and GovComs to have, sorry, my computer's, no, okay, we're good. Just making sure that, yeah, we have integration with other teams, and that the communication to the forum and Twitter, etc., is all included. Also, we're working with keepers, so talking with TechOps and working with third-party keeper networks to make sure that they're engaged in these new ecosystems as well. And that, of course, includes L2 user interfaces. So in terms of working with third parties, there's a lot of testing, auditing with, in this case, chain security, and making sure that the contracts are as we expect them to be. And so this all rolls up to the milestones, which I'll break out on the next slide. So we split these into three groups. So as you all know from our multi-chain strategy, we've referenced slow withdrawals, fast withdrawals, and MCD on layer 2 as the main milestones here with the respective domains. One point before I go into the plotting of these on a roadmap, I wanted to mention for awareness that we've currently got a lot of discussions around risk considerations. And this is quite a multifaceted discussion that's ongoing at the moment. So it's talking about roll-ups versus side chains. What are the implications of wrapped DAI versus canonical DAI? What is the behavior of DAI in the wormhole and across domains? And then what are the attack vectors that are present as a result of that? So the security implications and how these discussions steer our approach for sidechains, such as Polygon and others. So again, this is not restricted to roll-ups. It's also talking about sidechains. It's a very broad discussion, and it's a discussion that introduces a lot of risk considerations so that we have a broad view. So there will be a community call that I'm going to schedule as soon as I talk to David after this call that we want to have next week, which is going to dive into exactly these topics. And it will help to illustrate that the roadmap on the next slide is not the full end-to-end roadmap. Here we're talking about milestones for the three domains, Optimism, Arbitrum, and Starknet in blue, and then the technical work that's enabling them in sort of the beige color. But there will be others, and over time, this is going to expand as we look at the various liquidity pools that exist and the ecosystems that we build. So you'll know that the Optimism and Arbitrum have been delivered. So you can click through with me, David, slowly as I go through these. The Starknet DAI bridge is currently targeting the end of February. We've got medium confidence for that. There's some dependencies here. So we're working with, and this is the Starknet core unit team, so predominantly led by Louis and Maciek. So we've got some dependencies on the Starkware UI. There's some event audits which are going to be completed mid-February, and there's also work to integrate oracles. It's all going ahead, medium confidence there because of those dependencies. The technical work that's enabling the fast withdrawals and DAI wormhole is currently ongoing. That's some of the previous points I alluded to, like liquidity requirements, technical specifications, working with risk, making sure we have the keeper third parties involved as well. And then the fast withdrawals space. So Optimism and Arbitrum, we're targeting end of Q1. We have a high confidence on this one. There's some testnet reviews that need to be done internally and also some audit responses, which are our dependencies here. Now for the Starknet fast withdrawals, we've got medium confidence here because there's still audits and there's still quite a healthy discussion that has to happen around the prover trust assumptions. Because as you know, they don't have the slow withdrawal that the optimistic rollups have. So there's some further discussion that has to happen in this space. And then following that, we've got technical work for enabling MCD on L2. There's quite a lot of work here. We've got technical documentation, there's governance processes, understanding how the message relaying will work and be documented, how governance will engage with it, L2 liquidations, and also L2 integrations so that we make sure we have third parties participating, we have liquidity, we have involvement, because of course, without the liquidity, there's not much point being in the space. So working with third parties, market makers, and so on will be a key part here, which leads us on to the MCD L2 implementations for Optimism and Arbitrum. Again, we've got medium confidence here for the end of Q2. Dependencies include audits and doing the MCD deployment. So there's quite a lot of work in this one across the core units to do, hence the medium confidence. And then Starknet, because it's a slightly different implementation with TBD on the exact date there, but I'm sure Louis and Maciek and team will be providing input on that as we get closer, once we have those audits and once we understand the prover trust assumptions as well. So that's the high level roadmap we're working towards. All of these steps are mapped out in the little thumbnail that I showed earlier, and they have a breakdown of individual tasks that we work through. So I think on the next slide, I wanted to reiterate that protocol engineering L2 team will be deploying Optimism DAI wormhole to Kovan testnet next week, which is awesome. So stay tuned for more updates on this and opportunities to test. We'll have more news out on this soon, but this is a really big move towards the milestone overall. And yeah, keep an eye out for this one, which is really cool. And just a reminder that next week, Bartek and the protocol engineering team will be holding a multi-chain strategy meeting where we'll be talking about those risk considerations I mentioned on the previous slide. So scaling DAI beyond rollups. The key participants of this meeting will be, I think, of course, protocol engineering. We want to have risk, we want to have growth to continue the discussions we've had already. But I also see value in the community and delegates. So, you know, we mentioned the core units on one of my first slides there, but it's broader than that. It's community and delegates. So this will be a good opportunity for that sort of broader communication. So looking forward to it. And thank you for the opportunity for the brief update.
Damn, Derek. I should have scheduled you after me because that's good. That's a hard follow-up. That was really, really good.
Oh, thank you. I tried to keep it to time, but yeah, over to you. Thank you very much.
All right, sweet. All right, well, in that case, I'm going to do a disclaimer. Don't judge me too poorly for not being as amazing as Derek on my slides, but I'm going to bring us through the two collateral management initiatives. And so, yeah, let's kind of keep going. So on-chain collateral management, there is a handful of involved stakeholders, mainly core units. COM, SAS, risk, protocol engineering, you know, CES, SES, growth, oracles. There are many people involved in on-chain collateral management. Let me tell you, it is a key part of MakerDAO's business. And so in the work breakdown phase of our stakeholder alignment calls, we've identified really 6 major milestones. The 5th one we kind of axed last call, so forgive us for not updating the milestone numbers. But the overview is really, you know, the first one is to deliver the next major revision for the collateral onboarding process. The current process is a little bit outdated. It doesn't scale as well as we would like it to, etc. Milestone 2 is a liquidations infrastructure cleanup. This involves both, kind of sanity checking ourselves on the auctions infrastructure that exists, ensuring the handoff to SAS, and more. I'm going to cover a little bit more detail in the next slides. Milestone 3 is really to onboard curved staked ETH through this kind of renewed mapped out process that really maps all the touch points of the different core units involved in the launch of a given collateral. Like, we want to integrate our public communications around collateral onboarding and etc. So there's a lot of stuff happening there. Milestone 4 is to fully define the criteria for collateral offboarding. This is important for just regular business practice. As many of you know, if you've been following, just because a vault exists and there's DAI doesn't mean that it's necessarily profitable. There's overhead costs, like oracles, for example, that might make it really not worth it, and more. So yeah, there's some stuff going on at that milestone. Then skipping milestone 5 straight into 6 and 7. These are more bonus milestones, but the goal is in the next 2 quarters to fully clean out the stablecoin vaults. This is not just TUSD, it's also the old USDC vaults and more. And then lastly, there is a milestone for gas optimizations for the PSM. And so for the first milestone, I kind of created a little legend at the bottom right there. If there's a yellow dot, it's in progress. If there's a blue dot, it is not yet done. It has to be done. And then if there's a green dot, it's done. But in general, these are kind of the big components which have mapped out work breakdowns under each. But yeah, I don't know if you guys want me to kind of read through each individual one, but I'll go through it briefly. So one is to provide the renewed criteria for onboarding, admittance, and prioritization for the MIP6 applications. There also is a review of the diagram and process that's currently hosted at the collateral.makerdao.com site. We also, once the new process is kind of drafted out, we have to communicate it with the existing greenlit application authors. There has to be a complete and full process documentation of all of this, obviously. Then we have to determine the formal role of SAS in liquidations and auctions. This is actually ongoing. We also need to determine the prioritization of collateral types with a 2-quarter time horizon, according to this new criteria and process. And lastly, we need to kind of attach the parallel work stuff that has to happen on the engineering side, like crafting spells, etc. And not only that, but also partner relations, like growth stuff. Yeah, so that's the general overview. By the way, all of these slides are available and public, so if you want to kind of look at them again and update yourself on the progress, that's available on the forum. The second milestone is the liquidations infrastructure cleanup. There's a few key components to it. First of all, we need to collect relevant information to determine the pain points. That's currently in progress. We also have to ensure that SAS have full ownership over the process of extending the auction services. That's also in progress. We also have to ensure relevant infrastructure is up to date and risk minimized. This is actually a big part of the work that we did this past week as a result of Flappy Friday. And so actually big shout out to Denise for coming on the stakeholder alignment call and really for that forum post that Artem shared. And then lastly, we need to clarify and document auctions and liquidations aspects in the different life cycle steps. So these are all in progress pretty much. The third milestone is to onboard curved staked ETH. And these are the components that really are part of every single onboarding. There's a MIP6 application, a green light poll. The collateral is chosen as next priority by the teams. Then there's collateral assessments that have to happen, the Oracle risk and smart contracts assessments. Then after that happens, there's a governance poll. And after the governance poll passes, there's various implementations that have to happen. And that's where there's a lot of cross core unit touch points. And then about a month before the projected launch of a collateral, there needs to be an established partner initiative. So we reach out to the actual collateral partner. We organize, all of the comms that have to happen, any like special promotions, like really anything. And then lastly, there's the final deployment and activation. So this is more like the previous milestones. There's a lot of overlapping steps, but this is a lot more sequential. So maybe it's a little bit easier to follow than the other ones. But yeah, as you can see, we're close. We're in the implementation stage, and it's looking like it's going to happen pretty soon, likely end of February. Milestone 4 is to fully define the criteria for collateral offboarding. So there is in progress initial discussions, which are facilitated by CES's Robert Jordan, and other core units involved are risk, oracles, and growth. This is, and there's also an initial draft document that's in progress to define these. After that, there's going to be a few feedback rounds that the document goes through. Also, I believe it's going to be, the access to it will be expanded to other stakeholders. And then finally, there's going to be a forum post for public feedback before the final documentation is publicized. Or published, because it would already have been publicized. All right, yeah, so forget milestone 5, ignore it. These are just some bonus milestones because we added them just last week as we were reviewing what are really like the major milestones. And yeah, milestone 6, as I covered, fully clean out the stablecoin vaults. It's to be done. And then milestone 7, the gas optimizations for PSM. It's in the backlog, but the goal is to get it done by end of Q2. All right, so I'm gonna take a pause, take a breath. So I also happen to be the coordinator on the collateral management off-chain stakeholder alignment calls, and so here is the status update for those. Involved core units include real world finance, SES, CES, growth, Starknet, risk, and us, GovComms. So here's the overview of the milestones. The real goal for the next 2 quarters is to lead the existing deals through the due diligence pipeline. Obviously not all the deals, just the ones that are most feasible. Milestone 2 is to graduate the different real world asset related core units from the SES incubation program. Milestone 3 is to develop shared documentation around leading these deals. What are the common touch points? What are the things that we could standardize around these deals? What are the things that are essentially different for each deal? All that kind of stuff. Milestone 4 is a revamp of MIPS 6 in partnership with CES. So there's actually a revamp being planned in general for MIPS 6 applications to do more pre-filtering of applicants so that they know the criteria ahead of time. So if they don't fit it, they shouldn't be applying, and they should really be working to fulfill the criteria before the application even hits the forum. Milestone 5 is finally the infrastructure solution design. And this is kind of like the technical and user experience side of actually interacting with these deals. When we do set up a real world asset deal, like what is the client's experience? What are the UIs they use? What's the backend stuff that has to happen? Yeah, so let's move into the details. So to lead existing deals through the due diligence pipeline, the timelines for these deal completions are going to be withheld until they go through. This is important because major partners, like they don't want this. They don't want timelines because that kind of exposes them to insider trading, and just like there's real world considerations for very big partners around being public on timelines for these kinds of things. So they are going to be withheld. But in general, the 2 main components of this milestone down for the 2 highest priority deals of all the touch points
Hold on,
for
David.
core units and stakeholders.
Did David freeze for anybody else? Yeah, you got Starlink.
Yeah, I thought it was me because I always lose internet.
Am I back?
Yes.
Yeah, you're good now. If
Yeah.
you like rewind probably 30 seconds, you're all set.
Okay. So something estimated timelines are withheld. It's important for like big partners, big deals that, especially if they're like public companies and stuff. Timelines are sensitive, they change, people trade up based on timelines. So basically, until a deal is done, MakerDAO is not going to know that it's good done. But rest assured, there's lots of progress happening. So the two main components of this milestone are the work breakdowns. We have very high granularity on the two major deals that we're focusing on, which I'll get to in the next slide, and all the others to varying degrees. Additionally, there's a lot of progress that has been made on the definition of all the touch points for core units and other stakeholders that are involved in these kinds of, in each individual deal. So yeah, that's ongoing. Yeah, and so the two primary deals that are being focused on for this milestone are SocGen and Monetalis. And as you can see, there's like a parallel set of components for each of these deals. First of all, the business side of the partnership has to be solved. There has to be kind of like a point person for the partner. And actually multiple point people, depending on the part of the deal that is happening. An agreement on the term sheet has to happen. Legal engagement with partners, counterparties has to happen. Components of the transaction actually need to be mapped out and documented. And then after all that, the IT infrastructure and integration has to be planned and mapped out. And all while this is happening, usually after the term sheet agreement and the legal engagement with counterparties, and also the components of the transactions, the risk work can happen. So all of these things are actually in progress for both SocGen and Monetalis. And yeah, that's about as basic of an overview as I can give you guys. And also the purpose that I'm going through this in such detail is to educate our stakeholders really on the complexity of the work that's being done here. Huge shout out to the people that are involved. The second milestone is to graduate the different real-world asset-related core units from the SES incubation program. This is going to be a key step for Maker succeeding in the real-world asset space. We need to really kind of upgrade our operations with regards to handling these kinds of deals. And so there's three main real-world asset-related core units that are in the works. The first one is the real-world asset portfolio core unit incubator with Will Remore as a would-be facilitator. We also have the real-world asset legal review core unit. This is the facilitators TBD, works with Christian Peterson. And then lastly, we have a compliance core unit, which is facilitated or will be facilitated by Luca Prosperi. Each of these are in various stages. So the very first one is to get the starter agreements in place. This is for the incubation program itself. After that, the incubation program OKRs are set up. Then the bootstrapping OKRs are set up. And then after that, finally, the team publishes their MIP set, MIP 39, 40, and 41 subproposals, which govern the facilitator, the mandate. Well, actually, in order. The 39 is the 39 is the mandate, 40 is the budget, 41 is the facilitator. Yeah. And then lastly, the graduation is really marked by the reception of the first payment from the protocol. That means that they're ratified. That means that they are sailing full speed ahead and are no longer a part of the incubation program. So likewise, the real-world asset legal review core unit is in an earlier stage than the previous core unit that I mentioned. It is in progress looking for a facilitator candidate. In the meantime, SES has to implement a temporary budget to ensure that it can fund this particular core unit. And after that, all of the other components have to happen, but they haven't happened yet, which is why they're in blue. And then finally, there is a lending compliance core unit with Luca Prosperi as the would-be facilitator. The starter agreements are in place, and it's currently in its incubation program, OKRs, and bootstrapping OKRs phase. So those are all happening, and the MIP set has not been published yet, so stay tuned for that. All right, I know that was beefy. It's finished. I think, let me just to sanity check myself on time. 12:55. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So dang. So it took us pretty much a whole hour to get through those first two components of the call. Yeah, we're gonna kind of take that as some fodder for feedback and for adjusting things and seeing what we should do for the next calls. But really, we have about 30 minutes that we can overflow on these calls. I think they're actually scheduled for an hour and a half, if I'm not mistaken. So let's get into the discussion segment. Yeah, so upgrading surplus auctions, also known as flaps. We're going to talk through some considerations, options, and timelines. And this is an open discussion segment. So if you would like to speak, there is a really cool sort of functionality if you go into your reactions thing, which I actually can't find for myself right now. Where is it? You could raise your hand. Okay, just raise your hand or say call on me in chat or something, and I will unmute you and you could talk. But yeah, this is a pertinent topic because of really the liquidations that happened on Friday. Surplus auctions underperformed. They incurred, I believe, according to Primosh's analysis, they incurred something like an average of 20% slippage overall. And yeah, and the community acted very quickly through governance to pause them in order for the DAO to really take a step back and consider what should be next steps for this. So I am gonna stop talking and I'm gonna ask somebody else to kind of take on this part of the conversation, which is what are the options in order of resource investment? And I know right now we're in no burn for a while phase. All it took was a single vote to do that, and we've got it. And the next lowest hanging fruit is the rate limiter, which we know Sam has already built some code for. And that seems to be kind of in the pipeline. But the real open questions around this are whether Dutch auctions are a high priority for this, which is essentially what Liquidations 2.0 did for collateral auctions. It converted them from English auctions into Dutch auctions. And so now that same consideration is happening for flap auctions. And then there's others. So I'm going to take a pause and kind of give it over to anybody who wants to comment on these. Yeah, feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, so I mean, the sentiment that we had in the past couple of months was that there is a strong favor over doing some burning, at least among the community. So I've been advocating for no burn for quite some time, but at some point I just realized that there is no majority for doing that. So the whole idea of Lerping, the surplus buffer, was basically born. And from my point of view, if we don't have any majority on going back from this plan to something different, like no burning at all or whatever, we should default to coming back to the Lerping option. It's not that I particularly like it that much, but it's basically what the sentiment is right now, which is essentially the reason why I put up the signal request to bring back the burn. If there is a majority within the single request to not do that, I mean, I personally would like to see that. But there are good things about doing at least a bit of burn once in a while. But if we want to go for a bit of burn, then we should prepare ourselves by probably the rate limiting thing that Sam put up. And I guess the main question is, or we have basically two main questions: do we just go for a different way that we have been taking for the couple of last months and decide to just have a really insanely high surplus buffer, so we can be quite sure we are not going to go into flapping again? Or do we stick to the path that we have taken so far of going with some burn, but then we probably just need to prepare ourselves, which is adding some effort on protocol engineering. And we heard about it, they're working on different stuff. So it's in the end some kind of priority question, some kind of opportunity cost that we are going to have here if we distract protocol engineering from their roadmap. I think that's basically the question we have to ask ourselves.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Actually, Kurt Berry spoke a lot about this in the forum of kind of prioritization, not paralysis, but how do you kind of increase the connection between like what maker holders want, what's wise, and what PE and other engineering teams need to prioritize? Because I mean, as you can see, even just from the layer 2 initiative update, there is a lot on the table that is potentially a higher priority. And actually the risk team over the last few quarters have identified this risk with the flap. So it wasn't even kind of like something that people didn't know was going to happen. Everybody knew this was going to happen in the event of a very, very large liquidation event. And so, yeah, it is a very interesting sort of operational and governance question. How do we balance that need for prioritization? And also, like, how do you give, or how do core units really push back with like reasoning and stuff? So yeah, I just wanted to point out that that's a big aspect of this conversation as well, that scales to potentially other future issues. Yeah, Wouter actually frames it really well. The better question is, should we prioritize X? So should we prioritize Dutch auctions? And if we do, should we deprioritize Y in favor of Dutch auctions? And I think it might be, so there was actually a lot of debate around Dutch auctions. I think one part of it was the prioritization piece. Another part was, does it even make sense to do Dutch auctions given that they actually introduce Oracle costs to the flaps? Yeah. Feel free to jump on the mic, anybody, if you have strong opinions and stuff. Yeah, Tim, go for it. Or Nick, yeah.
Just your comment on Oracle costs just now. There's no extra Oracle costs, right? It's there is extra risk, right? Because the auctions, right, currently do not have oracles as a dependency, right? And that's seen as a kind of a protection almost against an oracle attack, right? Oh, we would need an MKR oracle.
Yeah, that's basically what I was alluding to.
Then there are oracle costs, right? So factor in at least 300K, right, annually for an MKR oracle, and okay, yeah, it's a little bit expensive, but you know, if you think about it in terms of like a slippage, right? Like if we are losing, we have 5% slippage and we think we're going to get better performance than that through Dutch auctions, right? So let's say instead of 5%, you have 2.5% slippage. So if you take the oracle costs and you divide them by that 2.5% slippage, the inflection point is like 12 million, right? So really at the scale that we are doing burns, right? If you think you're going to be burning, you know, more than that, then economically that kind of does net out to be an advantage.
But that's not factoring in the development, the time spent, and all of that, right? Yeah, I see Mark and Tim have their hands up. I know, Tim, you were first, but Mark.
Yeah, just very quickly. I mean, sure, I've been asking for the Clapper quite some time already, but I think it's not really about when can this come. It's not really about is this coming in 2 or 3 months. It's about how much resources are we going to bind with this initiative. Are we going to just some extra work Derek has to do? Then I'm fine with doing that. But if it's going to take 3 engineers out of his team, no, then that's not fine. I'm exaggerating again, Derek. But it's not only about how long will it take. It's also about what is essentially what we're not going to do, or what is the delay that we are going to have here. And honestly, I don't think we should burn at all. So why don't we shouldn't optimize for perfect burning. We should, rethink our attitude about how much do we need to burn in the first place, I think. And I'm fine with having a bit of burn, but I don't know. I mean, this is also one of the questions. I mean, Derek said in some forum posts that it will take a couple of weeks until we have the optimized, the rate limiting flapper in place. So we are not going to have a couple of weeks of burning. That's fine. My question is more, is this going to bind 2 engineers full time? Or is this just waiting for some audits and then spending a couple of days on the results of the audits and yada, yada, yada? That's the question I'm having. So how much is it hurting Derek to do that? If he says it's reasonable and makes sense, then he's probably supporting it in the first place. So I would, yeah, basically wait for his advice of doing it or not.
Yeah, it would be great to get PE to weigh in here. In the meantime, Mark, do you want to share your comment?
Yeah, my opinion is that we should not divert any resources at all to implementing improvement on the flap design right now. Like we should be 100% focused on making Maker and Die a better product. Like designing and wasting time, or in my opinion, is a waste of time to like figure out a way to optimize our Maker burning is just like it doesn't do anything for our customers. It's just 100% like selfish for Maker holders, and then I think will drive significantly less value long term, especially when that capital can be probably better allocated by hiring more resources, particularly developers. So I'm strongly against allocating any significant amount of resources, really any resources at all, to building a more robust burning mechanism.
Yeah,
I mean,
cool. And just for context, Mark Phillips is the new facilitator of the Strategic Finance Core Unit.
I'm speaking as a personal person outside of that core unit.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Sure. The other thing is, right, Brun's gonna publish his new version of kind of the previous tokenomics revamp, and having taken a look at it, it does not have a burning mechanism. So
I have conflicting information there, Nick.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
I thought even in the governance chat, Brun said that it preserves burn, but that the goal is over 5 to 7 years to kind of alter that mechanism.
Interesting. Then things must have changed. But my thing is, until we kind of know in how we're going to change the tokenomics, trying to invest a bunch of resources into a mechanism that may be not even there anymore in 6 months to a year doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Like if you're going to invest resources into building something and you think that thing is going to be around for a couple of years at least, right? That makes sense. But building something now that you're just going to throw away really soon, not so much.
Yeah.
I mean, we can do some kind of like band-aid fix, right? Rate limiting seems like a good idea, right? So we don't get the 15 to 20% slippage kind of days, right? Or even worse, right? You completely solve the zero bidding problem. But completely redesigning, right, a clapper or something like that, right, to try and get that 5% slippage down to something less, I think is not really worth the resources that you're investing in this, right? Like there's really low hanging fruit here with a rate limiter in terms of like resources invested to like fixing the core problem to a certain degree.
So this was also the first time that this has happened, right? So since Friday, there have been several community members that have upgraded existing tools and have built new tools to participate in these auctions. So the real problem was that we had too many of them go out at once, and we showed the community, look, there's a 20% discount available here overall, which is essentially like offering a coupon to keepers.
We lost
your
mic.
mic. Yeah, your mic.
And the NSA got you, Brian. They got
Sorry.
you.
It's trying to auto.
You're back and now you're gone.
Okay, I'm done.
If you'd like, just you could write that out, and perhaps like I could pick it up and share it. Yeah, so I do. So I'm hearing a lot of pretty much like common sentiment from the engineering teams and from a few key people. I'm curious if recognized delegates on the call have any sort of considerations to throw towards this prioritization question, and also I want to just sanity check what the other slide I have is. Yeah, there's some related considerations. For example, what can we do to better the flaps now besides rate limiting? Like, are there parameter updates that can be adjusted? And then also there's the question that actually Hasu brought up in the governance channel, and many others have discussed, which is, hiring a third party, external party for not just market making or OTCing, but also for actually managing surplus auctions, perhaps like completely off protocol. So that's another interesting thread of conversation around this whole topic that's happened. And also just to pause there and read what Brian was saying. His point was that new tooling exists since Friday to better manage flaps. So the system battle hardens himself after each event by bringing in new participants who want to close the alpha gap. This is very true. The beauty of anti-fragility, right?
Yeah, I think I'm in favor of just keeping the high surplus buffer. But if we want to go back to some degree of burn-like activity, I think it sounds weird, but sending it to a centralized party for market making is in my view.
Is what? I'm sorry, you cut out a little bit.
Sending it to a centralized party is it sounds a bit weird, but it's not. I don't think it's really that bad of an idea. I mean, they can definitely do more efficient like market making. I mean, that's their whole thing, like smaller fees than what we do with the 3 to 4% on the flapper. That's if we want to go that route. But I think preferably we want to just the high surplus, not worry about it. It's not an issue. We've got higher priorities.
Yeah, I think another thing that Long actually mentioned in the chats around trusting not just trusting third parties, but engaging in third parties. There's a lot of hidden costs, like on the governance side. Like you have to basically regulate your relationship with them, and so there is a cost there that should be considered. I see, Mark, you had your hands up, and I know Kurt, you just unmuted yourself. And also Chris Mooney is up here. So how about let's do Kurt, Mark, Chris, or maybe Kurt, Chris, Mark, depending on how related it is to the specific convo.
Yeah, I'll make a really quick point on the market making front and then get out of the way, which is that there's sort of a third position in between paying some centralized entity and continuing to flap or just leave there be no solution for market making, which is that you establish protocol owned liquidity. So like you buy back MKR through some mechanism, and then you create DAI MKR LPs owned by the protocol that's on the protocol's balance sheet. And I think this has a lot of beneficial effects across the whole ecosystem of making MKR it's just a more liquid asset. And I think that's important because MKR is part of the tokenomics of the maker system, and subsidizing that liquidity in some way is important. And when the protocol owns it, it can be trustless. There's no additional like third party you have to interface with. It's maybe it would be a little less capital efficient than a centralized market maker, and obviously it doesn't touch centralized exchanges, but I think there's a pretty active arbitrage community, or there are lots of people looking to extract NAV from the chain. So I think that arbitrage with centralized exchanges will take care of itself if there's deep on-chain liquidity. And I just like people to keep that in mind as a kind of a third option on the market making front, or as a way to use surplus buffer for MKR liquidity.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Kurt. And Mark, let me know that his comment might be a little off topic. So Chris, it's all you.
Yeah, I don't know. I think some of the mandated actors have heard me make arguments about this, and it's weird. I wouldn't say there's like a bunch of dumpster fires to put out, but there's a lot of like comments to address. I think in this case, we're probably better off to just try and like stay focused on exactly what the problem was here, and in fixing that one little thing, which is too many auctions went out at once. How do we fix that? We rate limit it. It has pretty much no additional impact if we rate limit it on, like, it's not like a liquidation where we could take like losses or something. So there's almost no impact to rate limiting. It's the lowest hanging fruit to sort of implement, and then we don't drag in all of the additional questions about whether we should be burning or not. I will put up like a very passionate defense of some amount of burn, because I think our game theory is based on that. And so it's like, I just don't want to drag in like all of this additional argument. I also, the mandated actors heard me sort of make this argument with response to like Hasu's comments. And I think even Rune had spoken in favor of doing this, and Sam's in favor. So I don't think that we should be taking a direction where we take elements of the protocol and put them on more humans. I think it breeds centralization. I think it'll create weakness. And I think what we want to do is keep pushing towards automation, decentralization, and it's just like we're so close on this, like a couple tweaks and it's fine. It just doesn't make sense to me to like farm this out to some human. I like to think of the protocol as like the Hoover Dam, right? So like some sort of neutrino bomb goes off and like humans die. How long after that does the Hoover Dam continue to like operate, right? Like I'd like to think, due to some attack, like how long can we get the protocol to continue to operate with like, you know, complete automation? And I like thinking about that as like a way to sort of drive development of where we should go in the future. And it frees our time up to work on like new stuff like L2 expansion. So yeah, those are the sort of two comments that I wanted to make more publicly, I guess, than just like in private groups.
Maybe I'll take the other side of that. The other option, sort of a centralized market maker. Right? Even with this fix, like we're taking a 3 to 4% slippage, which, you know, it doesn't sound like a lot, but we're taking 3 to 4 million in losses. So like sometimes we get a little bit too Starlinked. Okay.
It's not even
Actually, it's almost like your mic isn't totally plugged in or something.
Yeah.
It's by it kind of sucks. So yeah, what was I saying? So yeah, the auctions, even with the fix, they'll take a 3 to 4% slippage loss, which isn't great. If we do want to turn on some amount of burn, like I think sort of having ideological purity with not having centralized parties in all aspects, I think can be damaging. Bottom line, to me, the flap is not about trustlessness and sort of this sort of decentralized. It's about how much maker can we burn the most maker. That's the goal of it, right? So if shipping it to a centralized party in a streaming fashion burn more maker, then I think that's a good thing. We just have to look at what our risk exposure is. So like worst case scenario, they start stealing the DAI, we just turn it off. We can do that in a 2-day delay. Like at most they can steal like 200K, and we're losing that amount already just by the flaps inefficiency. That's my point on centralized market makers. I don't think they should be feared.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that perspective, Sam. Chris, you want to take the mic?
Sure. Hopefully this will work. Let me know if you can't hear me. I just wanted to, I think, support what Chris Mooney was saying and add one clarifying point. I think the problem, or more nuance, is that too many auctions hit the market at the same time. And within that is there wasn't enough time to react to those auctions. And so something that I feel isn't really being discussed that much here is what would have given us more time to react, or the market more time to react, is increasing the auction duration. And so in addition to the rate limiting, is there a small tweak we can make there, which is zero engineering effort other than writing the spell, that would help harden this aspect to it. And then we can focus on, efficiency and or stability, or I'm sorry, surplus buffer, and using the resources for growth outside of this kind of emergency one-off situation. If we can just alleviate the problems that caused this very specific incident.
All right, I need to jump in here a second and provide a counterpoint, which is that it's not just a problem that too many auctions went out at once. It's that the English auction mechanism for flaps is fundamentally suboptimal for the blockchain environment, and itself has broken game theory that is centralizing and encourages winner take all dynamics, even if you're limiting the rate at which they go out. That's kind of a technical discussion to get into on a call like this. So I'm posting this thread in the chat from the forum. I encourage everyone who wants to have an opinion on this to go read every single reply under that thread and understand the entire discussion of how the flap auction mechanism is just fundamentally centralizing, anti-competitive, and broken, and trickling it out. Okay, maybe that's fine if it's just a band-aid because as a compromise, because some people want to burn and insist on that and some people don't. But I just push back on the notion that, oh, the only problem is that too many went out at once. No, too many went out at once, and we don't have a scalable or effective long-term mechanism.
Yeah, thanks for that. I want to give it over to Mark. He's been waiting a bit to bring up his point.
Thanks. So I have several points to make on this subject. I guess one, like with Rune likely releasing the new tokenomics first, I don't really see any rush to get back to burning immediately. If it's even relevant, if the community loves it, I think we're gonna have to take some time to assess which direction to go. And then I also think we need to take a step back and think about what really drives value to Maker. And to me, it's clear that it's our long-term cash flow generation. And if you also look at the stock market, you'll see cyclical companies like in the auto or steel industry and other commodities that have extremely low PE ratios because they go through boom bust cycles, just like crypto does today, where the income fluctuates significantly. So you could see, Ford or PE, Ford with a PE ratio of 6 at the peak of a cyclical market. And at the same time, you have Procter & Gamble or another, like Costco, stable businesses that aren't impacted by market cycles with a PE of 25 or 30 in normal times. Part of the issue with Maker today is, our income's reliant on these boom bust cycles for crypto. And maybe that's changing, maybe it's not, but one of the biggest things that we need to prioritize investing in, and this will require a lot of capital, is real world assets. Real world assets, for one, has a multi-trillion-dollar, hundreds of trillions of dollars of total addressable market. And for two, it's completely uncorrelated to crypto markets. And when you have income streams that are not correlated to each other, the valuation will increase because there's going to be more stability in the income that will drive to the protocol. So I really hate to see us burn MKR today when there's so many different things we can reinvest in. Chris and Kurt made some comments on the forum for different things that I'm sure they'd love to be able to do today, but I think we don't have the resources to do it from the technical side. So yeah, I'm heavily in favor of increasing the surplus buffer because that'll allow us to invest more in real world assets and also allow us to take more risk when we're onboarding real world assets. Yeah, I'll let Luca take over since he's the expert here and can explain it probably a lot more eloquently than myself.
Thanks, Mark. No, sorry, I just wanted to double down on what you said on 2 points. I think, first of all, what you're saying as a corporate finance, on the corporate finance side, it is very important. And I think the simplest way to think about it for non-corporate finance expert is in paying out capital outside of the protocol, we are implicitly admitting that we don't have better ways to use that capital internally. And for a protocol that has growth potential, the growth potential of Maker, this is obviously not the case, because we could use that capital in so many ways to expand the revenues of the protocol, as Mark suggested. The other point is, because the crypto market in normal markets, you buy back, and in buying back, you would expect positive impact on price. Crypto markets are not there yet, so I think the effort that we are doing is not even efficient to sustain the price. So I think it's not even a good use of that capital at this stage of the crypto markets. And the second point, so I agree with Mark, and the second point, just to double down again on what Mark just said, given that he's talking about real world finance, is that we are, I think, first of all, we have huge potential to grow in several avenues that will require capital. So it's better that we keep that capital within the protocol, in my opinion. And secondly, we shouldn't forget that we are running a currency, and we have seen what happens in a currency that he's keeping very, very, very thin. And I know it's a different protocol, but he's keeping very, very thin buffer, like Abracadabra, for example. And I think we should never forget that it is much better to sacrifice a little bit of yield for MKR holders, and there is not even there, because the markets are not mature enough to appreciate what we're doing when we buy back the token, to keep some extra buffer inside, because we are running a currency at the end, and our credibility as a protocol is our asset number one. So I think all the elements are in favor of keeping these resources within the protocol, and I'm sure there are better ways to make this buffer efficient and to incentivize MKR holders, but I will not comment on that, because I know that Rune is heavily working on a tokenomic revamp, but I'm fully endorsing what Mark just said.
Makerman, you want to?
Can I chime in here a little bit?
Sure.
So I want to echo Luca here, right? So companies basically will buy back their stock because they have nothing better to invest in. This is particularly true of dividend companies, because they're going to pay themselves dividends, loosely speaking, but it's also true of just earnings, right? You buy back when your PE is low, you try to sell when PE is high. Literally, I don't see that buying back Maker is really helping us for price. This is really a political issue other than anything else. To Chris's point, if we build an SB buffer here, that's actually good for Maker holders, because basically it means we're covering ourselves in a loss event. In the loosest sense, we're building cash as an asset against dilution related to a loss or risk profile, right? And we actually have, as Luca said and Mark said, we have better investments that we can do that can net us better return than even the really awesome PE that Maker has right now. And we need to do that when times are good, and to bank some cash for when times are bad. And so this is, to me, it's a real financial thing, but it's really becoming a political issue. And I see these two things battling quite strongly, and I would like to settle it. I'm also sensitive to comments about how we don't have engineering to do this. Well, fine, then let's just not burn, let's build cash. If we get lots of cash, we can decide to do it when we have engineering and time then, because if things are bad in the environment, we're not going to have a lot of things to work on, and then we can fix stuff in the protocol.
Chris, go for it.
Yeah, so I'd like to point out this way of thinking that growing surplus buffer just helps us grow revenue, and this is like a long-term thinking versus like burning Maker is just like very short-sighted. And I based on this discussion, I feel like maybe there's a need for on-chain vote for the whole DAO, like on a strategy on burn versus surplus buffer for the next year, not for the 2 months, but for the next year, so all the teams can plan in an appropriate way, so this won't change too often. And I think we're missing something like this, because then maybe why would you work on better flap actions when they're not going to be used in the next year, right?
All right, so I want to make a note of the time. It is 30 past the last top of the hour. I know that's a weird way of saying it, but I want to thank everybody who did come for the call and for who participated in the discussion, and also for Derek for putting together the awesome update. Really, everybody for participating in this call. I'm going to stop the recording here. But I'm going to keep the room open for maybe another 10-15 minutes for people who do want to continue having this conversation. But yeah, thank you, everybody.